the key takeaway is the action that people can take right now, and is to get your conversion tracking right. That's what I would suggest at the moment. Get that right so you have that data. I'm Julia-Carolin Zeng, and this is SEO in 2026.
Julia, what's your number one SEO tip for 2026?
My tip for SEO in 2026 will be monitoring, testing, and adjusting, because the search landscape will keep on changing. So what we've seen so far in 2025 is nothing yet, in my opinion.
Nothing yet. The big changes are yet to come. Okay, so we'll go into monitoring, testing, and adjusting, and what you're doing there and what needs to change, what SEOs need to keep an eye on. But your last comment there was that the search landscape is continuing to change. So how would you summarize in the way that it's continuing to change at the moment?
So I think what we've seen in 2025, and the buzzword in SEO is really the great decoupling, so where we see impressions going up, clicks going down. But I see it more as we've seen a democratization of the search landscape with new players now in the field. Google's suddenly getting a lot of competition because people perform their searches not anymore just on Google or Bing, as it was historically. But there's now all these LLMs out there like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, and so on. Google has expanded on the AI overviews. They rolled out AI mode. I've also seen for some of my clients suddenly quite a significant amount of traffic from Yahoo. Don't know yet where that's coming from. Then there's still DuckDuckGo and Ecosia out there. But ChatGPT really seems to become the big competitor to Google, even though, in my opinion, the actions and the searches that are performed in those different places aren't exactly equivalent. But I would say we've seen a democratization there, because Google is not the default for anything anymore that is related to search in that sense.
Okay, one interesting phrase that I'd like to pick up on is you said the actions and the searches of people within ChatGPT aren't equivalent. So what do you mean by that, and what actions do you see instead of traditional actions?
So what we see now with LLMs is people really put in questions and have conversations with this bot, which is something that did not happen in Google before. In Google, traditionally, people put in one word or two words, or if we go extra long tail, maybe some search queries had up to 7 or 8 words, but it usually was never a sentence in that sense, what we would define in linguistics as a sentence. But in ChatGPT and Perplexity, people really put in prompts, which are really sentences with a proper question mark at the end, or even whole paragraphs where they describe their issue in more detail. And that's a big change. And so what people do in ChatGPT, for example, is not always exactly the equivalent of something that would have before happened in Google. And so this is already a big distinction there. And then what some early studies have shown is that the trend goes towards, hey, I asked this question ChatGPT, I have a conversation, but in the end, I still perform a follow-up search in Google, because now I actually want to go to that website and find that brand and check them out directly, which ChatGPT at the moment is not really doing, or not doing that well. But they're obviously working towards that with embedding shopping experiences so that you can buy directly in ChatGPT and don't even have to leave anymore, and so on. There's also tools already out there that really track these behaviors, which is incredibly expensive. And they speak about agentic search and these things. So really that there seem to be voices out there that say, okay, at some point, everything we do will be just a conversation with a bot. I don't fully agree with that. But we see this kind of distinction there on what is done on which platform, and how do people still go through to a website in the end. And in my opinion, that is going to change even more in the next few months and probably year, because these other platforms, they keep on evolving. like the example I've just given, ChatGPT, including shopping experiences and so on. They're probably also going to roll out ads at some point, and then also user behavior changing. So what I have already seen for this year is in like all the usual tools that we use for keyword research. Traditionally, I'm not mentioning any brands here. Everybody knows which ones I'm talking about.
Oh, feel free. Yeah.
But what I've seen is that now the keywords that these tools suggest also become more question-like.
Is that because they're getting their data from AI?
It's either that, or what I think it is that people also start now putting more questions into Google, where they would historically put in 3 words now. Now they say the question. Still, I have not seen a massive use of question marks.
So you said say the question, but do you mean in audio form or do you mean in written form?
In written form. In written form.
Okay.
But they spell it out as a question. And so it's very interesting to monitor this at the moment, also to see what data is available. Because if I exported a list of keyword suggestions 3 years ago, I would literally get keywords that are maximum 3-word-long phrases. And by now I'm getting a good mix of, here are these traditional keyword phrases, but here's something that already looks more like a sentence. It's still not a full sentence. Again, I haven't seen any question marks, anything like that in there yet. But in my opinion, with the increased usage of these LLMs, where people put in prompts and whole paragraphs, it also changes over time their behavior on how they search in Google. So maybe in 1 or 2 years from now on, it will all just be questions, and tools like people also ask, for example, will become the default that we go to. Again, we don't know for sure that this is happening, but it's kind of the trend I'm seeing, that the changed offer in technology that we can use to perform searches also changes user behavior. So it's kind of these 2 things that contribute to what I would call the search landscape shift, is that we have more technology available that keeps on evolving, and also user behavior is changing.
I'm mulling over many many things that you said there and just wondering which angle to go down here. It makes me think that potentially less people are using shorter tail searches on the likes of Google, and that could be for multiple reasons. Obviously, it could be because search behavior is just changing, and the way that people ask for things tend to be longer tail and question orientated, as you say. But it could also be because perhaps people are initiating their discovery phase of what they're looking for on another platform apart from Google. Perhaps they're using TikTok or social media a little bit more, discovering what it's likely that they're interested in, and then deciding that they have an interest in something and then asking questions about it in Google. What would you think of that?
Yeah, so I actually attended a great talk about this last week at a conference here in London. And there was some data that confirmed that now, and if we look at the whole attribution channel and the different touch points of a customer, it has now gone up from 7 touch points up to 20. And I'm like, that makes sense because, yeah, people see the brand in multiple places. Like you have several social media platforms. Then there's also Reddit and Quora, which seem to become more visible everywhere. Then there's Google, there's the different LLMs that people can search for. Really, in this talk, the speaker showed that this is now how people kind of find brands. And then in the end, the actual conversion might come through a PPC ad. But you kind of don't know what are all these places that the same users has seen the brand before that kind of led up to that final decision. Oh yeah, now I'm actually ready to buy from them. And that just makes our data analysis much more complex. It already is, also because there's a big gap in data.
Exactly. That's the next question. What do you do from a data perspective? Is it the SEO's responsibility to get all that data from all these different touch points? And is it possible to get data from LLMs to actually give you decent insight in terms of how people are interacting and how that changes people's behavior in more traditional search engines?
So that is another part that I was kind of going into with my tip, is that we need to adjust depending on what's available to us. At the moment, what we have available is very little. I also see this kind of bucket in Google Analytics that says unassigned traffic or direct traffic growing and growing and growing over time. So that is a lot of data where we just don't know what it actually is. At the moment, it is also very limited what data we can get out of LLMs. And if you can get the data, it is incredibly expensive. Like, there are very smart people out there working on tools that can track these things. But then you look at the price and I'm like, yeah, no, maybe I don't need that data as of yet. So these are things that also, in my opinion, will change over the next year. It just has to. There's also already a great guide out there that suggests ways on how you can get your data by setting certain things up in Google Tag Manager, combining things with log files and so on. So at the moment, it seems very complicated to even get to the data, but people are on it. So I'm expecting to see a lot of great things to come out there over the next year that will make it easier. Maybe somebody develops a script that you can then easily embed in your reports and so on. Again, the log files, I have one client where it's even a problem to get them because the hosting provider just makes it really, really hard. And so all these things we need to adjust and monitor. And that's exactly what I mean with my tip, is to look into these things. It's like, hey, what do we need? How can we get it? And then come up with creative ways to actually get there. Because at the moment, there's no off-the-shelf solution. It is, yeah, here's all your data that you need. And we also have already included a handy analysis of that. That just doesn't exist.
So if user behavior is changing so much, if it's such a challenge to get the data that we need in order to actually determine what users do before they actually make that purchase, what does this mean in terms of reporting to our clients? If we're an SEO consultant, if we work in an agency, how is that evolving?
So what I see myself doing now every month is I adjust my reports. So it's not anymore, yeah, you can automate your reports once and you just need to look at them every month. No, I see myself really adjusting certain charts every month, adding new overviews, new screenshots from several places, just to make sense of the data. Because with the great decoupling, yeah, you see impressions going up, clicks going down, but what does it actually mean? So what I've started tracking, for example, now is a subset of pages that had always conversions in the previous quarter. And then to see, okay, how's traffic doing to these pages? These are our high performers. These are pages we know are converting well. And if traffic is going down there, here's an action we need to take. And ignoring all the more kind of informational searches where I'm like, hey, at the moment, I'm okay with the traffic going down because we know it's AI overviews that's taking away that traffic. But yeah, I see myself constantly adjusting month on month, depending on what's available. And I see that trend continue. And to be honest, I don't know for how long, because as we said before, things keep on changing. Tools are adding new features on all ends. User behavior is changing. And it's really about making sense of the data and, in my opinion, also focusing on the data that really matters. One thing I noticed is that a lot of businesses and website owners should do better and can get right as of now is to set up proper conversion tracking. I still see it very often when I take on a new client that they're not even tracking any conversions or or the things they're tracking are just the default things that come with GA4. I'm like, hey, here's a click to a demo request. Can we track that? Here's another CTA. Can we track that? Can we track if people have watched this video? And so it's becoming really important to define what is a conversion for us and then start tracking it. And what I mean with what is a conversion for us comes back again to these 20 different touch points that customers have these days. So maybe signing up or subscribing to your YouTube channel should count as a conversion now, because that is a brand interaction. That means this person has just watched your video and is definitely interested in following up for more, or signing up to your podcast, your email newsletter, whatever it is, depending on also what you do and how long conversion channels usually are in the industry we're talking about and so on, is getting these things right to have at least that bit of data accurate and understanding more. What do people do on our website? How do they interact with our brand? So on. Yeah.
Yes, you need to know your typical user journey. You need to have a content marketing strategy that maps to that, and then you can set up goals around that. Yeah.
And funny enough, that was always the thing. It just has now become more important and more visible. Also because one thing that I've seen is businesses now want to see more. They want to see, hey, how much traffic are we getting from ChatGPT and how many conversions and so on. But they're not necessarily increasing the budget that we have for these things. So as SEOs, I think we need to become really clever about what do we actually look at, what do we spend our time on, and to spend it in the right places. So Reddit, for example, is one thing that is talked about a lot at the moment, and we see it everywhere. And it seems to not only come up in Google more and more, it also seems to feed into results that are coming up in LLMs and so on. But it takes a lot of time to get active on Reddit and to find those right conversations where you should get involved and so on. Again, it's also something that I know some people in our industry have already something in the pipeline to come up with better tools to find these conversations that are relevant to your brand and so on. But then again, it comes down to, does this really matter for us? Or is this just something, in general, Reddit is becoming more important, but is your audience actually on Reddit?
Well, let's see how this conversation evolves, and hopefully we can continue it and maybe SEO in 2027 or at some other stage in the future.
Yeah, exactly. But at the moment, it's a really exciting time. It also can be a bit scary and intimidating on what's happening there, but it's just important that we keep our heads up and really sometimes also take a step back and say, okay, what does this all actually mean? And do we need to jump to the next new thing immediately? Or do we just monitor for a bit, understand what's actually happening here, find out where our audience actually is and what are the metrics that matter to that particular business before we jump onto the next thing and here and there and try and do everything at once.
Julia, what's the key takeaway from the tip you shared today?
The key takeaway is the action that people can take right now, and is to get your conversion tracking right. That's what I would suggest at the moment. Get that right so you have that data.
Julia-Carolin Zeng is an SEO consultant at Charlie on the Move. Find out more at charlieonthemove.com. Julia, thanks so much for being on SEO in 2026.
Thank you for having me.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2026, the book, over at SEOin2026.com.